Hello BookTube, I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with the first in a series of discussion videos to take part in the Asian Readathon, which is organized by Read with Cindy. I'll put a link to her announcement video in the show notes. This is a series of discussion videos about short stories, all of them publicly available online by Asian writers, and doing a Zoom discussion about them once my BookTube or bookish collaborator have both read them. And today is the kickoff for this series. I think I'm hoping to do 3 or 4 during the month. And I'm going to start out of the gate with Kim of K. Becker's Books. Welcome, Kim.
Hi, thank you.
How are you?
I'm the first one.
You're the first one. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Great.
Doing
Now,
good.
Kim and I filmed a chatty video because another thing that I'm doing is instead of just shouting out booktubers that I love and that need a lot more love and subscriptions out there, instead of just merely shouting them out, I'm bringing them onto my channel this way to show them to you. And
I love that.
so we had just filmed a chatty video about Kim's channel and books and books and books yesterday, but I want this video to go up first to get the series started, and soon thereafter you can see even more wonderful K. Becker's Books stuff.
Oh boy.
So we are discussing a short story by the Korean-American writer Paul Yoon called Vladivostok Station. It was published in Harper's Magazine in 2016, and it is free for all of you to read online. So I suggest you read it before you watch, unless you just don't care about spoilers. Kim and I have talked about it, and we're not going to worry about spoilers because it's a short story published many years ago, and you can read it before you watch the discussion. So if you care about spoilers, read the story before you watch us. We'll wait. Go ahead, and then come back. Okay. Go wait. So Vladivostok Station, Paul Yoon, did you want to get us started there, Kim?
Sure. It was interesting because the 2 main characters are 2 young men. It's Kostya and Misha, I think is how you pronounce that name. And starting the story, it starts off with Misha sees this man walking towards him down the road, and he realizes that it's his longtime friend who had gone off to war, basically. And at first I thought the story was going to be very nostalgic, and the coming of age of these 2 boys and their friendship, and there were parts of that in there, but it very quickly turned into a lot of remembrance of the past, but what Kostya just survived and how that affected their relationship. And I thought that dynamic was really interesting because Misha's the one that's remembering a lot of the boyhood events and the things that they experienced together. And even though it's a short story, there's not really any plot there. It's a lot of memories and a lot of flashbacks and shared experiences.
And what caught me off guard was that as the story opened, again, you've mentioned their names, Misha is the protagonist, and it's about him encountering his old childhood friend Kostya, and we find out that Vladivostok is the nearest big city. So I'm thinking, so we're reading, this is a Russian story by an Asian American writer. Okay, interesting, very interesting.
Right.
And then within a few pages, we find out that these are actually Korean Russians.
Right, which was, it was the kind of like, oh, okay.
That's right.
I get it now.
Right. I want to talk about how old they are in a minute, but both of these men, their grandfathers had come to the district was Primorsky Krai, which is in the far east of the Russian territory, and the main city is Vladivostok, but they live 3 hours from that city. But their grandfathers came there after having been in a Japanese labor camp on the island of Sakhalin, which was Japanese and is now Russian since World War II. And they just followed their nose until they found a place where they could work and settle there. So these are Korean Russians. And that's a big part of the story too, all of the trauma of what happened to the grandfathers and through the generations.
Right.
How old, in the present of the story, which the story opens where Misha recognizes Kostya walking toward him. How old were they in the present of the story? I couldn't really decide.
Kostya, we find out that he was flying planes. He was in the Air Force or whatever it would be called.
Yes.
So, I don't know, 20s, late 20s?
Maybe 20s. Misha makes lots of observations about how much Kostya has aged, but
Yeah.
prematurely, or we don't really know. Misha's father is quite old.
Right.
Seems quite old, but maybe just
Yeah.
ill. It's kind of an open question, isn't it?
Yeah, and you make a good point, because it's like, I assume maybe 20s, because, and again, he was in Chechnya. So when did that take place? And was
Because there were
he?
two of those campaigns, two of those
Yeah.
wars. Yeah.
And I mean, was he drafted when he was, in his teens? Was he? You can't tell.
Right.
You're right. You can't tell. And Misha does notice that Kostya's got some grays in his hair. And is that from age, or is that from trauma?
Right.
Your guess is as good as mine.
And time in general, I felt as I was reading it, was kind of fuzzy.
Yeah.
There's just a sense of almost like, I'm not a big Casual Ishiguro fan, but I have read enough of him that it kind of reminded me of the way time is fuzzy in his fiction.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
liked that about this story. It made
Yep.
me confused, but that was okay for the most part.
Yeah, it was a little confusing, but like you said, it's almost as if you could take this story and drop it into any time period and it would make sense. However, there were a couple of like date marks, when Misha was talking about when they were coming upon Kostya's old house, and he was talking about the boy on the bicycle. He was talking about different things that brought you into a time period that you could imagine. He was talking about the old houses were used by kids to party.
That's right.
And
Yes.
they could hear their music playing on the radios. It's like, okay, that's a more modern time frame.
I agree with you.
Now I can better imagine the setting.
I definitely agree with you. The present of the story is very close to the present day. Yes,
right.
Definitely.
Yep.
So very interesting that you started using the word nostalgia. And yeah, there was some of that, but so much of it was like kind of like the opposite. Like there was such a deep sadness.
Yeah.
And almost like a blotting out of memory, and a lot of questions and emotions that were purposefully not asked or explored or expressed.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, because Misha was the one that is kind of looking back at what they did as boys. And you're right, because it wasn't like, oh, the good old days. It wasn't happy at all, because when they were young boys, Misha took a shovel and was digging around in the ground looking for bodies of camp survivors. And it's like, why would that be entertainment for a couple of young boys? And Kostya would help him. And then there was that point in the story where Kostya's father finds them and figures out what they're doing and attacks him with a shovel and almost eviscerates his gut with a shovel, because his father has mentally gone into a different place, probably of some sort of trauma or PTSD, and just horrifically injures his own son once he realizes what the boys are looking for. And you're right, it's not nostalgic, and it's not talking about the good old days, but Misha's got all these memories of their shared experiences, whether they're good or bad.
I would like to share that passage because it's a stunning passage. It's also, for me, one of the most confusing, and maybe the one that I don't really know how I feel about. I'm not sure that it completely worked for me. So before I share the brief quote, to set that up more, because if time is a little bit fuzzy, geography is fuzzy for the characters.
Right, I agree.
Because their grandfathers had been interned in Sakhalin Island, which is, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of miles away from Vladivostok. I'm assuming it's not that close. But Misha grows up without any sort of sense. He knows the stories vaguely of what happened to his grandfather and Kostya's grandfather, but he doesn't realize that happened far away on an island.
Yeah.
I think he actually says that he hadn't even known what an island was. So that's the background of what you were just mentioning, that he is trying to dig up bodies of these escaped or murdered laborers in the Japanese labor camp. But of course, it didn't happen there.
Yeah.
And then, just like you said, Kostya's father discovers them. It's not really made clear how did the Kostya's father know what they were doing. Maybe they explained it to
Right.
him, but he just freaked out and he attacked
Yeah.
his son with the
Yeah.
shovel. Eviscerated is the right word. And that's very violent.
Yeah.
And then this is Kostya remembering it and telling in the present of the story, reminiscing, if I can use that rather sentimental
Yeah.
word. He's saying
Right.
this directly to Misha. He took your shovel and he went after me. And as he approached, I thought he would strike my face. What surprised me was that he didn't. He hit my stomach. The way you would use a bayonet. The tip of the shovel ripped me open. And I think he would have pushed harder if he hadn't woken from wherever he was. When I think of that day, it's never the pain or what happened or what we were doing or the shovel or even how young we were. I think of where my father was in that moment, where in his mind he had gone. I had never seen that from him before, and I never did again. Wow.
Yeah, that was a powerful point. The important phrase in there is he wonders where his father went. You know, the man is standing in front of him having attacked him with a shovel, but he's physically there. Mentally, he's gone. He's in a whole other place, and just gave me the chills.
Oh, it was chilling. Chilling is the perfect word. And then again, thinking about time frame and ages and whatnot. So would Kostya's father have been born in the prison camp, or would it have just been the memories that his father shared with him? Like what is his trauma about? Just second generation trauma? It's not that
Yeah,
he
I mean,
lived through.
I don't know if because the grandfather was in a camp, both grandfathers were in the camps for 6 years, I think they
Yeah.
said. Maybe it was based on that. Maybe the grandfather came back. He probably would have come back with mental and emotional trauma as well as physical of some sort, probably. And that probably was that legacy that went from the grandfather to the father to the son. Maybe that was where it came from, is the father just was horrified that the boys were trying to find the bodies of people who died in the camps, and he mentally went to another place.
Yeah. Just fascinating. And
Yeah.
I did a little bit of digging just before we started chatting this morning about this district. What's it called? The Primorsky Krai district had been a Korean Russian settlement before the end of World War II. And it was also one of the first mass expulsions that Stalin did. Stalin was always messing with the Soviet Union and expelling people of a certain nationality from where they had lived for generations into a completely different area. And so in 1938, he had expelled all or most of the Koreans that lived in that district. So it's interesting that the grandfathers settled in an area that had been known as Korean district.
Right.
But so that it's like they were moving into a land that had been traumatized, which
Yeah, and
also intrigues me.
yeah, and I wonder if that has to do with they didn't have a choice. Maybe that was where they were just allocated to,
That's
and
right.
that was the only place they could go. And that's how it hit me as well, is why did they end up there? Why did they stay there? And,
And
you
that
know,
gives rise to its own sense of disorientation. Are
right,
we on an island? Where do we live? And trauma.
right. And
Wow.
it's interesting, you were talking about the island, and Misha as a boy has no concept of where this island is. What is an island? He's thinking it's over the mountain, and he's thinking it's somewhere that they could actually walk to over time. And it's almost, I could read into that the boyhood innocence of those thoughts, that
Sure.
to him, it's not really a faraway place. It's not something so far removed from his current surroundings. And I just kept thinking to myself, the poor boy is just innocently thinking it's just over the mountain, and he's playing in the dirt. He's digging, boys do gross stuff sometimes.
Sure.
So they're looking for the remains of people. And it's a combination of that innocence and the horror of them not realizing what they're actually doing.
The other thing that really struck me about this story, among many other things, but another one that was pretty central to my experience of the story, was that Misha's place in the family, like he seemed kind of invisible to his parents or to his father, and Kostya kind of took precedence or was almost treated as if he was more important. Like there's a photograph that's still on the desk or on the
Yeah,
table in the inn that his father
yeah,
runs, Misha's parents and Kostya. And Misha says, I don't know where I was that day.
Now, you know what that photograph is? It's not Misha's parents. It's Misha's mother with Kostya and Kostya's father.
Oh, is that what it is?
Did you catch that?
No, I missed that. Oh.
And I was thinking, there's got to be a backstory there somewhere.
Oh, I didn't
I'm
miss that. I
almost
missed
sure
that
that that's
detail.
what that was. Here's a little spoiler. Maybe that has something to do with Misha's mother's abandonment and disappearance. It's like, what was that? But you're right, it was a weird family dynamic. And I thought of Misha as kind of a floater. He's there, he's present, but he's, like you said, he's almost invisible. He's just floating through that existence as Kostya, who's his friend, is taken in kind of in an emotional way by the family. And he's elevated into the family.
So do you think that Kostya is Misha's mother's son? How would that
I
work
don't
out?
know.
Are they the same age? The boys are the same age, aren't they?
I think
do we
so.
know?
I don't know.
Misha's mother, the marriage doesn't last long and she just disappears.
Right.
And that's central to the emotional atmosphere of the story.
Yep.
Wow, I did miss that. You're good.
And
Thank you.
Yeah, she was apparently a Russian woman who stayed at the inn and never left. And he made a comment that she stayed at the inn, she never left, and they tried, but she ended up leaving the family. She abandoned them.
In the present of the story, when Kostya and Misha are kind of reminiscing, Kostya makes a strange statement about books and that Misha was never around.
Yeah.
And Kostya said, you were the reader. You were the one that was always disappearing. So there was something about that was fascinating.
I know. And it's almost like when, I don't know if you have siblings, but I'm one of 5.
Ooh.
And each one of us had a different childhood, even though we had the same parents.
Yes.
And it's almost like those perspectives never match up. And I thought that was kind of what it was they each remembered it their own way, but somebody had to be the one that kept disappearing. And like you said, in the story, it seems to be Kostya, because he's taking the books and running out into the tall grass. And even Misha says of him, when they're cleaning in the inn, Kostya is scrubbing a tub with a stain that's been there for years, and he's lost himself in the task, and Misha has to kind of shake him out of it. So he kind of disappears in his own head as well.
At times, again, kind of thinking back to Ishiguro's stories, where I thought, is this just one person?
Yeah.
How weird is this really? I don't know.
Yeah. It's so funny because The Remains of the Day is one of my favorite books, and it's such a different style and tone than a lot of his other stuff. And I love that book so much.
I haven't read Remains of the Day. I have a feeling I might like that one.
I think that's a Shawn book. I thought it was such a beautiful book, and the way he told the story of an English butler. And I thought I was going to be bored as hell when somebody told me, you got to read this book. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll try it. And I loved it.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to like it. And I didn't get along with any of his other novels that I've tried, but I've only read 2 stories by Ishiguro, and I love them both.
The story is starting off, like I said, it almost, to me, I thought there was going to be some nostalgia, and very quickly realized these are not bringing up memories of the good old days. This is very different tone and very different types of memories. And I think Misha, for his part, he did not go to war because of his leg, and I don't know what kind of disability that was, but
it's not
he
explained.
Was excluded, right? Unexplained, but he was excluded. So he is remembering some of those times of closeness that they had in their friendship and the different things they did when they were boys. But Kostya comes back with a whole other set of quite different memories and experiences, and their paths diverge. They go in completely different directions.
Literally and figuratively.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Misha is talking about his job on the railway, and the beginning of the story when he's talking about those islands and not really understanding what those are. The end of the story, he's fixing the seats in a railway car, and he falls asleep.
Yep.
And so he ends up on the train for 3 hours, and he ends up in the station, and his coworkers don't wake him up because they thought, he looks so peaceful, we'll just let him ride. And so he ends up in, how do you pronounce it? Vladivostok. So he ends up there. It's in the city. They wake him up, and he's, a little out of it. They say, just go into the city. You've got an hour. You do whatever.
Great.
Starts off talking about not understanding what the islands are. And he's throughout the story, from Misha's perspective, it's all those memories and it's those experiences that he's pulling in, and he's remembering different things. And he talks about, you know, their grandfathers, and he talks about Kostya's family and his mother. And by the time he's in that city and he's roaming around and he stumbles upon a bookstore, it's the first time in the story where he's in the present, he's in the moment. And it's not about those memories that he's thinking of. It's him just walking around, doing whatever, and observing what is right in front of him.
Ooh, I like that.
He ends up at the ocean. And that's when the very end of the story, it was, at first I thought, this is a really abrupt ending. I don't think I like this ending. But then I started to think about it, and it's almost as if he's in the phone booth, on the phone, calling his father because he thinks his father's going to worry. He's standing there with the phone looking out at the sea, and he tells his father, "I'm at the sea." Yeah. And I could imagine him, that far off gaze of possibly trying to pinpoint where an island would be.
He's situated in the present. Yeah.
Right.
It was a really intriguing ending, and I like your take on it very much.
At first I was like, I don't like this ending. This is, wait a minute, there's got to be more.
I liked it better the second time when I reread it this morning.
Me too. Me too.
Well, it's an intriguing story, and I hope that the people watching will give us their comments and interpretations and whatnot in the comments on our panels.
I did a little research on Paul Yoon. Did you know? I found out his grandfather was a North Korean refugee.
Yes.
And he is married to Laura Vandenberg. She wrote The Third Hotel, which came out a couple of years ago.
No, I didn't catch that detail.
Yeah, and they both teach at Harvard now. They're both lecturers at Harvard. And he went to Phillips Exeter Academy, which is about 45 minutes away from me.
Oh, okay. And I didn't realize how young he was. I don't know why I always assumed that he'd be a much older man.
Yeah, I think he's 40 now.
And he's kind of cute.
Yeah. Talented.
Have you read anything else by Paul Yoon? This is my first anything by Paul Yoon.
Yeah. No, I honestly have not heard of him before now, but I really am intrigued, and I would love to look up his other stuff.
He had a novel out this year, Run Me to the Earth. The new novel, Run Me to the Earth, is set in Laos, and it's about 3 orphans during the Civil War there. So quite a different geographical setting.
Yep. That sounds interesting. I'd like to look into that one.
Yeah, me too. 3 years ago, he had a short story collection. Oh, no, he's had 2 short story collections. Well, maybe we have to buddy read one of these, whether it's a short story collection or his new novel, because I'm certainly intrigued.
Yeah, that's good. I'd love to do that.
You don't need to commit live on air.
No, I said I'd love to do that, but I'm not saying anything more.
Let's think about that for the future. But this was a great discussion and a very interesting story. Are you a star rating person? Would you venture a star rating on this?
I think I'm a solid 3.5.
Okay, and
I didn't love the story, but I liked it. This is the type of story that, even though it went back and forth in time as far as memories, it was a fairly narrative path, and I like that type of a story. So I did like it. I liked it a lot. 3.5. I thought there was some really good themes that went throughout. So
yeah, I would give it a 4, and I'm a bit maybe more generous with my ratings than a lot of other booktubers. But yeah, I liked it, didn't love it.
Yeah. Makes
me want to read more. Paul Yoon.
Yeah, it does.
Well, I think we'll leave it at that. And thank you very much, Kim.
Yeah, thank you again. This has been really fun.
It was fun. Happy reading.
You too.